Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. Now, pressure keeps mounting on the federal and state governments to surmount the several security challenges currently facing the country. In the midst of this, the federal government says it needs more weapons to combat insurgency. The Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, said during a forum that some world powers have refused to sell vital weapons to Nigeria. He also said there are countries that have refused to release some military equipment the country has already paid for over 2 years now. Of course, the minister did not mention any specific country, but he appealed generally for more support in the fight against insurgency. Let's discuss this further. I'm now being joined on the program by Kabir Adamu, who is a security risk management expert. He joins us via Skype from Abuja. Mr. Adamu, thank you very much for joining us on the program as always. When you heard the minister make that statement, just how did you feel?
A bit concerned, mainly because as an insider, I'm aware of some of the reasons why the international partners are refusing to sell weapons to Nigeria. So frankly, I expected the minister to be a bit more truthful in terms of identifying the reasons. If you do not have something and you have to go to the international market to get it, then you have to be ready to play by the terms that the international market has laid down. Now, the international weapons market is a very tricky market. A few countries control that market actually, and at the top of that is the US. And the US has been very clear in terms of what it wants developing countries to achieve before they sell weapons to developing countries. And the most obvious one has been democratic principles, respecting the human rights and other democratic principles. And I think the fear is that they don't sell weapons to a country that has autocratic tendencies, and then those weapons are used, and then of course an inquiry is conducted, and then they get to find out that those weapons came from, let's say, a U.S. ally, or the U.S. has participated in one way or the other in developing those weapons, and then citizens are killed. So those are the kind of principles that...
But is that not hypocrisy? Because whether we like it or not, those weapons themselves from some of these countries, including the United States, are actually finding their way to the hands of insurgents. Insurgents across the world. They are finding their ways to terrorists across the world.
So, Deji, this is what Nigeria needs to do. I was making the point that the international weapons industry is quite regulated and complex. And if you're going to it, you should go to it with all your national powers at play. So diplomacy should be at play. You should go to countries with the full arsenal of your diplomatic power. So in other words, the top diplomat, who is Mr. President, should probably be at the forefront, and then supported, of course, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then the one that most times we don't talk about, our intelligence capabilities, because you want to make sure by the time you sit on the table, you have all the information required for you to purchase that weapon. In other words, if there are elements within that industry that need to give consent for those weapons to be purchased, then your intelligence network, your foreign intelligence network would have provided you with that information. And so when you sit on the table, you've already lobbied them, and they are supportive of that move to buy that weapon. The other very important element is the ongoing, what I would call, trade war between China and the US, and how each of these sides is trying to win allies. Now, Nigeria, we've been sitting on the fence, as it were. We are, tiptoeing with China on the one hand, and at the same time tiptoeing with the US on the other hand. So it's high time we put our stake and understand that as a regional power ourselves, to an extent, our consent is required in certain diplomatic practices. And so when we go to the international market, these are the kind of things that we need to put on the table. The minister was short of mentioning all of this. The Super Tucano that we paid for, why haven't those Super Tucanos been supplied? Part of the ridiculous reasons we're hearing is that there is a demand, as an example, for quarters with a swimming pool to be built for the trainers that will come to train the Nigerian Air Force on the use of those Tucanos. Now, was that part of the agreement? I doubt. So if it's coming as an extraneous element within the agreement, what have we done as a country to push back and use our diplomatic powers so that that is addressed? Or are we going to come out on air and tell Nigerians that certain countries are delaying the purchase of weapons? So that's why I was shocked, actually.
Because the truth is that whether we like it or not, these terrorists are getting access to these weapons. These weapons are finding their way to their hands, and they're using them against, the legitimate forces of various countries now, and not just Nigeria, across the continent, and we see that in other places as well. So it's just difficult to understand why the international community would choose to do this, and then they keep blacklisting the country as being, unsafe and all of that. But let me ask you this: is it possible, for instance? I mean, you just talked about the U.S. Is it possible, or is it not possible, to also approach other countries? Countries that may not have, that maybe the U.S. has no leverage over us, so to speak. Say a country like Russia, for instance, to buy weapons from them, and then these weapons get delivered?
It's very possible, but there will be consequences, of course. Look at what happened in Turkey when they approached Russia and got some weapons. You saw how NATO and the entire U.S. arsenal turned about against Turkey in certain areas. So yes, we can do that, but by the time we do that, our foreign policy should be directed towards understanding the consequences of that, and then, of course, not only understanding it, but mitigating the consequences of that. We're too aligned to the U.S. For a lot of reasons, really, to want to be on the receiving end of U.S.'s anger, as it were, or diplomatic, powers. Of course, our relationship with UK, given the close relationship between the UK and US, we want to be careful again not to offset that. But having said that, yes, it's possible to purchase weapons from Russia and certain countries that the US does not have much influence over. But what kind of weapons would be available to that? We bought certain weapons from Pakistan, from Eastern Europe. We've done all of that. But the kind of weaponry we use, we need and we require, I think, unfortunately, we would need the consent of countries like the US. The issues that have been put forward against our having access to these weapons. I've mentioned our democratic principles. Last year, in September 2019, the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial killings, Agnes Callamand, came to Nigeria. And that visit was very instructive. She came to Nigeria because petitions had been written over extrajudicial killings. IPOP wrote a petition. I think several other groups like that wrote petitions. And we're all privy to what happened. They claimed that the police killed their members extrajudicially. And so she came. She spent 2 weeks. And at the end of her visit, she released a preliminary report. That preliminary report is an insight at what the international community is thinking about Nigeria. Now, to my amazement, she referred in her report, in the preliminary report, she referred to a previous report written as far back as 2007 by her predecessor, who had also visited Nigeria and had identified certain aspects of our laws, especially the police, the laws governing the operations of the police and the military, that were not democratic. It allowed the police, it allowed the military to use heavy powers that were beyond what a democratic country would allow. And she recommended in that preliminary report that those laws should be changed. And interestingly, DG, she said between September and June this year, she will be engaging with the Nigerian authorities to ensure that those laws are changed. Now we're in August at the moment. I can bet you that those laws have not been changed. So what I'm trying to say is that we're operating in a market that is regulated. The operators of those markets have given their rules. We do not have an option but to go to that market. Now, if we're going to that market, we should understand those regulations and play by them. It is not by sitting behind our seat and complaining that we're not being given the weapons. No, let's look inwards, and those things they're asking us to do. If those things are things that are good for our country, then we should go ahead and do them. If they are not good for our country, then we should abandon them and go to countries like Russia. But frankly, complaining that they are not selling to us will not solve the problem. Even if, like you rightly observed, the terrorists are laying hands on some of these weapons. And how are they laying hands on them? It is through the illegal gun-running channels that exist all over West Africa.
And of course, these illegal gun-running channels you're talking about, they are very well known to the international community, and they're actually not doing much about. They're not doing much about the situation, because, I mean, if they were really serious about this, it probably would have been checked. That's just the truth.
The reason probably why, I mean, there are laws governing international relations. The sovereignty of a country, independence of a sovereign country, internal operations of a country. Most of these gun-running channels pass through countries that are sovereign entities, and it will be very difficult for an international country to come in without the invitation of those.
And the truth is that some of these countries are actually the countries that are denying Nigeria now these weapons and giving those conditions. But the truth is,
Deji, the point I'm making, if you look at Libya, the countries that are between Libya and Nigeria, countries like Niger as an example, and if you look at the vast land in between Nigeria and Niger, frankly, the onus is on Nigeria to ensure that the regional cooperation between Nigeria and Niger and several other countries in the sub-region.
I understand your point. My point is that, look, how does the weapon, how do these weapons actually get to Libya? They actually come from Europe. So some of these European countries are actually the ones, putting these conditions now in place for not just Nigeria or other African countries that are facing challenges now.
I agree with you totally. And where we lost it was when our regional, initiatives as a regional superpower were lost. Because when Libya happened, the ECOWAS should have put its heads together and managed the outcome of the Libyan situation. Unfortunately, we didn't. And currently, there is, I would say, a proxy war ongoing in Libya. We are all witnesses to that, how certain international powers are using Libya as a front to exert their influence. And the consequence is what we're feeling in Nigeria. So, yes, that is a fact. But, I mean, we need to call a spade a spade. The responsibility is ours to protect and project our interest. No country would feel the impact of insecurity in Niger like Nigeria because of the huge border between us. And given the very scarce resources that is available to Niger, it should have been in our interest to support Niger in terms of protecting its borders, tackling insurgency, as well as the gun-running channels that crisscross Niger. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing enough of that.
It's a very complex situation anyway, and sometimes actually doesn't make sense. Thank you very much, Kabir Adamu, for joining us on the program and for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. On DEJI360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country.
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that band.
DEJI360, providing clarity to issues.